Welcome back. The mayor of Canada's largest city is embroiled in a scandal concerning public drunkenness, drug use, dishonesty, and vulgar language, among other things. What makes for a good leader? Does a leader's morality matter? And what are the Islamic principles of governance? Here to discuss that with me, Brother Shabir Ally. Now, Brother Shabir, why do we want our leaders to be good?
Well, we're seeing in the example of a bad leader why we really need good leaders. We need leaders to be moral examples for our children. We need leaders who will inspire us to greatness. We are all busy fighting crime and we all abhor crime. We want our leaders to be good representative of this great ideal that we want our city to be as crime-free as possible. So it shocks us when our leader is seen cavorting with people of bad character. And so on. So we need good leaders to hold our communities, our cities, our countries together along the lines of principles that we all hold to be dear and the principles for which we are all striving in our own little ways.
Do you think sometimes we set the bar too high in terms of what we expect of our leaders? In some ways, leaders are a reflection of the society in which they live. So they're just like us in many ways.
Still, we want our leaders to be the best among us. And we can't have someone who represents the lowest common denominator. When we see, for example, a leader spouting vulgar language, we ask, what about his education? Did he not receive any sort of training, even for the job, even if he didn't have that before? How do you speak to the press? How do you express yourself in public? There are certain private things that you don't say in public. And if it's necessary to speak for clarity about a certain private matter, then there are euphemisms. There are ways in which you can say a bad thing, but in a good way. And we find that the coarseness that comes across sometimes is really shocking. And yes, we know that this kind of vulgarity and so on is represented in many segments of our society. And in a way, it's good that this has come to the fore because it makes us realize the extent to which it has reached. I mean, this kind of vulgarity, pornography, and so on that we have spoken about on our show previously.
We should be clear that we're speaking about Mayor Rob Ford, right? The mayor of Toronto. We're not speaking about all leaders, but about this one particular example.
Yes,
which is a pretty bad example.
In which case, my mention of pornography has no connection. But the point I wanted to make is that vulgarity in general has reached such an extent that it was possible for our mayor to use the kind of language and the words which he used in addressing the press. So when we think about the way in which our culture has deteriorated over time, we are seeing a reflection of that here. And so your question is quite valid. At the same time, we want our leaders to surpass all of that and to represent the educated segment in society so that the rest of society can look up to that as an ideal and say, yeah, I want to be educated like that man. I want to speak like him. I want to carry myself about in a way that is respectful and decent and civil.
So what I sense you're saying is that we want the mayor to steer us back to the good, or any leader to steer us back to the good.
Yes, while we recognize that leaders are human beings. I mean, in one of the council debates it was being asked, well, did none of you smoke marijuana? Did none of you commit any sin? This is like to say that if nobody is free from sin, well, neither should our mayor be free from sin. But that's not the point. We're not saying he should be free from sin. We're saying that while he is in office, he should represent what the office is about. he should do his job properly, and he cannot be showing up drunk. And this is where we go back to our religious teachings, and we see that drunkenness has been condemned both in the Bible and in the Quran. And if people would just simply follow their religious teachings, the world will be such a better place. But to a large extent, in modern societies, we have turned our backs to religion, and we act as if we can govern ourselves without the guiding principles and teachings of the great religions. And we're seeing the effects now.
In some of the Islamic discourse, drunkenness is disparaged because there's a sense that you become almost like an animal. You lose your mental faculties, the mental faculties that a human being would have, and you lower yourself in some ways. So I guess that's one of the reasons why drunkenness is not seen as a good thing in Islam.
Yes, when Mayor Ford says, you know, I said those things under a drunken stupor, well, we need to all sit back and think about what people have done in drunken stupors, and the negative effects of alcohol in our
and it's not an
society.
excuse to say that you've done something in a drunken stupor.
Well, the best way forward is not to become drunk to begin with, because this is the point that you're raising in your question. People will do things in drunken stupors. So if you don't want to do those things, you want to absolutely reduce the chances of doing such things. Well, don't become drunk. And the Islamic teaching is that don't drink alcohol at all, because who knows when you will become drunk. You take one sip and another one and another one, and eventually you find yourself drunk before you know it. It's almost like food. You sit down at the dining table, you keep eating, you don't feel full at the time, but you only realize a few minutes later how much you have actually consumed, because that's when you start to feel stuffed. Well, you become drunk before you know it. And the best thing is not to have alcohol at all. That's an important teaching.
But so what are the other Islamic principles of governance? How you run a country, how you run a state, how you organize to be in charge of a certain community?
Well, there are many points that here come to the fore. One is that the leader needs to be humble before the people. A leader can make mistakes, but he can always apologize, and he can always make amends before it's not like mistake upon mistake. Now it's reached a point where apologies don't matter anymore, because there's so many errors, blatant ones, huge ones, that it seems that it's best for
the apologies don't seem sincere anymore.
That's right. There is also the sense of leaving the position, resigning out of humility and out of remorse for what has happened. If one really loves the people and loves the city and loves the area of governance, then one needs to do what is right by letting it thrive on its own without one's own personality becoming the stumbling block for the progress of the city in this case. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, described a good leader as a servant of the people. And it's not that a good leader will serve himself or serve his own pocket or be there for his own pride and glory or to earn money from the position. And so stepping away is easy if one did it for the right reasons. And it is in the same vein that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is reported to have said that we do not give these positions to one who desires it. It is part of the modern electoral process that candidates vie for votes. And this is not a bad thing, because this is one of the ways in which people become educated en masse to know who are the leaders and what they stand for and so on through that very campaigning process. But that can go too far, where the candidate is doing it for his own glory, and he starts to campaign for his own benefit rather than for the sincere hope that the people will elect the right candidate. So if we are in it for the people, then it's easy, again, to step aside and say, okay, let the city run without me, let the best man or woman come forward and take this position, hold the helm, and take this city forward and I'm going to go sort out my own issues. So that kind of humility and sincere dedication, service to the community and to the people is what we expect in our leaders.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that I find in the Islamic principles is that you are responsible to the people and to God, and you are accountable to them too. It's not just like you're running around doing what you want to do, but you're held to a certain standard.
Yes, and I believe that responsibility to God is something we need to stress because this is often forgotten. If somebody wants to say I don't commit acts of infidelity, they say I'm married and I'm happily married, so I couldn't commit those acts. But a Muslim would say not only that I'm happily married and therefore I wouldn't commit those acts, but first and foremost that I believe in God. And because I believe in God, I wouldn't commit such things. Regardless of being married or not married, the first thing is I believe in God. And because of my belief in God, I cannot rape and rob and cheat and steal and smoke crack cocaine and so on, because I believe in God, simply put. And because I believe in God, I cannot pilfer or cheat or steal from city funds or anything like this. I'm not saying that our mayor did any of this, but I'm speaking more generally to say that when a person enters into office with that belief in God, it's not only his responsibility to the people and to the principles that are put in the charter, but that person being responsible to God knows that even if I can hide everything from everyone around me, I cannot hide things from God. Commonly people say, well, can you prove I did that? Well, the question is, did you do it or not? And if you did it, God knows that you did it, and it'll be proven on the day of judgment, because all of the records of all of our deeds are somehow stored in the universe, and that will be manifest to us on the day of judgment. So a Muslim does not take that attitude, you prove it to me, but the Muslim takes the attitude that, well, I've done wrong, I'm remorseful, I seek the forgiveness of the people, and I seek the forgiveness of God, and I will do my best to rectify my deeds and upbraid myself and recover from this kind of drunken stupor.
Very well said, Brother Shabir. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
We'll take a break, and when we return, we will answer questions we receive from you, our viewers.